go right into the sermon for the ritual of relinquishment that follows. I had this recollection today that for years during this service, the paper I burned, which held the things I wanted to leave behind in the old year, held the same names, the same situations, the same regrets, the same old habits over and over again. Are you going to burn the same names, the same situations, the same old habits this year? There's a story about this. Admittedly, it's a little corny, but it illustrates my point, so I'm going to use it anyway. It's a story about someone who's walking down the street, you may have heard this before, and falls into a deep hole and gets stuck in that hole for a long time. It takes them a long time to get out. As they are climbing out, they say, "It wasn't my fault that I fell in that hole." The same person a week later is walking down the same street, pretends not to see the hole, falls in the hole, takes them a long time to get out, and says as they're climbing out, "It's not my fault I fell in that hole." The same person the next week on the same street is walking down the street, sees the hole, falls in the hole, and climbs out after a bit of a struggle, saying, "Now it's a habit. It is my fault I fell in that hole." The same person, the same street the next week, walks down the street, sees the hole, walks around the hole, and on to their destination. But it gets better because it doesn't end there. I could go on all day like this. The same person, the next week, walks down a different street. Right? Does this sound familiar to anybody here? Does this sound like our lives? It does to me. Sometimes we keep going down those same paths, the things that we might have learned from. And that's why we end up here on this Sunday writing down the same names, the same habits, the same situations that we want to leave behind. So there's good news and bad news about today. It's an opportunity to name that thing, to leave those things behind, and to go down a different street. That's the good news. The bad news is that this service magnifies all that we did not accomplish in our lives. It feels like time has flown by. The Kala Chakra, as the Tibetans say, the wheel of time keeps turning, and we come back here to be asked the same questions. In this service of relinquishment, what will we burn away? What will we leave behind this year? I would like to burn most of last year, actually. Failures, conflicts, illnesses, a back injury, the feeling less able than I am in a few realms of my life, the disappointments I have in some institutions I've been involved in, not this one, or the things that I worked on that didn't pan out. I could burn it in a big heap up here, not just on one little piece of paper for 2014. But without 2014, I know that I wouldn't see my children growing stronger. I wouldn't have seen the book contract we have now for our grief workbook. I wouldn't have seen some of the amazing moments that we had in this place. So Reverend Phillips asks us in the reading, is today the same? And I say, only if we let it be, only if we don't notice the subtleties. You know, I was fortunate enough this week to be invited to South Florida with my family. Now, I could burn the 36 hours of driving we all did to get there and back, but I learned something about this last few lines, the last line in Reverend Phillips' reading. The ocean crashed in every day, over and over and over. We all have been there. With a little bit of attention, I could notice the subtle differences, though. It wasn't the same. Sure, it was the same ocean, but the waves were different every day, even each hour. Some slanting in, some crashing together, some being pulled by the tide to the left or to the right. I think this is what Reverend Phillips wants us to know. Today is not that different from all other days, except that we ascribe to it a difference. It's a chance, we say, a chance to see the subtle differences. Today is a chance. It's not about resolutions easily broken. I know half of you broke those resolutions 24 hours after you made them. I did. But today is about bearing witness to the majesty of everything again. Witnessing to the story that points to something larger than our own small stories. Here we have a room filled with people, not a room filled with regrets. A room full of people wanting to turn over new leaves. That's why we came here willingly. To enter into a larger story together. And today our story is about turning over new leaves. To turn over a new leaf means originally to turn the leaf of a book. But for us, it means to begin again, to have a fresh start, to start behaving in a new or better way, to start behaving in a different way that is sustainable far more than flimsy resolutions we make on New Year's Eve. And God knows I need to turn those leaves. I need to remember that my actions, my choices, my ways can always improve. Without that, we are nowhere. In this way, turning new leaves means knowing, as a wise person once told me, that our greatest treasure is the wisdom in our hearts, so often clouded by our inability to turn leaves in our lives. The wise generally share an optimism that life's problems can be solved, can be seen clearly like the hole in the road. The wise rarely are stymied by regrets, not out of a callousness, a refusal to entertain the regrets, but out of a sense of balance in life, a balance that comes out of knowing how to leave behind what needs to remain behind and create a new story each time we have an opportunity to do so. Now, on regrets, let's just talk about that for a moment. Unfortunately, for about half of us here, regrets might be very powerful. I say half because researchers at Princeton University, namely Hans Schwant, says regrets peak at age 50. Unmet expectations feel painful to those of us in midlife. Something for you young ones to look forward to. But something our elders may have shed, which means that when we get to that moment where we write on our little paper, those of us between 40 and 50 might need a few more sheets. But it's okay. Today, in a way, is not about regrets, which, if we're honest with ourselves, come from decisions we make consciously. We cannot regret our God-given abilities or disabilities, our natural autonomic responses, our birth order, our families of origin, or how we respond when most honest with ourselves. Regret should only come about decisions that we have made. And while I encourage you not to dwell in that realm, I acknowledge regrets might make the list. They do for me. But stronger and more potent are the things we see in our lives when we ask ourselves, what is the great story we are shaping? What roles are we playing in the stories of our lives? And how might we turn new leaves to change that story? Those stories might include disappointments, people and entities we want to leave behind, all the failures, all the stumbling, the things we don't wish to carry into this new year. But remember, the other side of the leaf we are turning is also blessings, life-changing moments and wishes. Howard Thurman wrote of looking back at the year previous. He wrote, "I remember with gratitude the fruits of the labors of others, the beautiful things I have seen, the moments of distress that proved to be groundless, the new people I have met for whom I have caught glimpses of the meaning of my own life. I remember the dreams that haunted me. I remember the awareness of the Spirit of God that sought me out in my aloneness and confirmed my life with new courage and abiding hope." The blessings are the other side of the leaves we are turning. And I thought for a moment this week that we might write on the other side of the paper, where we write what we want to leave behind, the wishes we want for this year. Like the Buddhist worshipers in the temple in parts of Asia I have seen, who go and burn wishes for those who have passed on, we might make small wishes to accompany our acts of relinquishment, so that they are signposts to us of where our stories might turn. So before we do this, I ask you to think about this. What is the story emerging in your life? The old one of creation, of judgment, of renewal and grace, a time of coming into being, of lively possibilities? The hope of this day is that we can know better the stories of our lives being lived out by us, by naming the holes we are falling into, by naming the things we can leave behind. And in doing so, we acknowledge that we can change. Without that acknowledgement, we are nowhere. Now, there's no magic in this. When you burn that paper, you will not change miraculously overnight. But it is a marker of something more sustainable and substantial than the resolutions you have already broken. It is a hope for the story of your life. In this way, we become full of potential. We acknowledge the power of renewal. We acknowledge the presence of hope. Perhaps today is the same as every other day. But I don't think so. I think today is the time of creation, of judgment, of renewal and grace, a time of coming into being, the being of lively possibility. Let us live into that now. Let us know that as a blessing on our lives. I invite you now to write on your small paper, not a book, not even a paragraph. If you need a pencil or you need one of these papers, the ushers will give you one. Just for a moment, and maybe on the other side this year, a wish as a signpost. We will take a moment, and then the ushers will invite you, those of you in the middle, from the back forward in your circle, and those of you on your side in your circle.
We invite you every year to rise with us and say together the Kol Nidre prayer. The words are printed on the back of your order of service. We'll speak the words together. Now, all here are set free to be themselves, not slaves of pressure, duty, or habit. Each and every commitment to unswerving behavior or opinion, by consent of the community that stands in this place, is now nullified, canceled, and made as naught. Now, all here are set free. We who have often said yes when we meant no, and no when we meant yes, from all busyness committed before the altar of guilt. We are set free from our choices of the lesser good, and from all burdens we have carried longer than we should. May we be at one with each other, with our past, with all nature, and with Thee, mystery transcending all language and praise. Now we begin our lives anew, as free women and free men. As we cross the boundaries of year and year, we nullify the false walls we have created. May true at-one-ment come, and the new year begin with perfect and refreshing peace. Amen.